Welcome to the Clique podcast. I'm Dani Watson, a mindset and manifestation expert and founder of the Clique, a company that helps women overcome their fears and limiting beliefs to create a life and business that they love. Within this podcast, I will help you get clear on what you want, identify the blocks that are holding you back, transform your mindset and raise your vibration so that you can co-create magic with the universe. If you are looking to design a life that truly sets your soul on fire and manifest more success and abundance, then you are in the right place. Hello ladies! So today, as I record this, it is an absolutely beautiful day here in the UK. We don't get many of these. It is a bit of a heat wave here, so it's absolutely gorgeous sunshine, really hot, lovely warm weather. So I am definitely making the most of this. And today's episode is all about self-love, which I think fits in pretty well. Given that today is so lovely and I always feel my most high vibe self when I'm out in the sunshine. In fact, today I was able to actually get up early before the rest of the house woke up. I was able to go to my office, which is based at the bottom of my garden. My garden overlooks these amazing fields. The sun was just coming up, so it was warm, but it wasn't too hot. And I was able to meditate. And that for me is one of the ways that I really love to practice self-love. Is having that time for myself to carve out some kind of ritual that makes me feel good. And really that's where I want to start with today's episode, because we're talking about practices that really allow you to demonstrate self-love. So helping you cultivate self-love within yourself. What are some of my favorite practices that allow me to do just that? And this idea that we carve out time for ourselves, it seems so simple, yet it's one of those things that actually so many of us just don't get round to doing. And I've spoken about daily routines so often on this podcast, but for me, that is perhaps one of the biggest priorities when it comes to me and my self-love, is just giving that time for myself, finding the time in my day for myself and doing the things that make me feel really, really good. And there is something to be said for being able to do this first thing when you wake up. Because for me, what you're saying is, I matter. I am a priority. The first thing on my priority list for the day is myself. It's this whole idea that you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you want to be able to flood the world with love and abundance, flood your family and the people that you care about with love, it starts with how you love yourself. Okay, and just saying yes to yourself first thing in the morning, saying, yes, I am a priority and I'm going to take the time and, make the effort to actually do something for me first thing, really helps cultivate that self-love. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the different rituals that you can use as part of your daily routine, because I have spoke often on this podcast about those rituals. So for me, it's things like meditating, journaling, reading something that inspires you, perhaps doing some sort of exercise such as yoga. I love to make sure that I fill my body first thing with something that's really nutritious. So it might be, my favorites are either a turmeric tonic, which is basically hot water with turmeric, fresh grated turmeric, ginger, and half a lemon squeezed into it. It will either be that or it will be a celery juice. Rather than just defaulting straight away to the caffeine and kind of flooding your body with that, you're saying, I am looking after myself. I am honoring my body and, really practicing self-love by making sure I'm being mindful of what goes into my body first thing. But aside from carving out that daily ritual for yourself as a way to practice self-love, what are my other self-love habits? What are my other practices I use to help cultivate self-love? Well, the first thing that I want to talk about is getting out of my comfort zone. It's not something people necessarily associate with self-love, but getting out of your comfort zone is something that I would recommend you start doing daily. Okay, so you want to be doing this on the reg. In fact, if any of you have been through our free course, which if you've not, by the way, you can sign up at wearetheclique.com /free course. Within that free course, one of the things that we encourage you to do is to do something outside of your comfort zone. And a really quick and easy thing that you can do every day is have a cold shower. Doesn't necessarily sound like, something you'd associate with self-love, having a cold shower. Often when we think of self-love, we think of a decadent bubble bath, lovely hot, warm water, something that's really relaxing, something that makes you feel really good. Admittedly, a cold shower doesn't feel so great. In fact, the first few times when you start doing this, you will think this is like the anti-self-love, like it feels uncomfortable. But that is the whole point. Self-love isn't always supposed to be this comfortable, happy, sitting in a bubble bath, lounging around, getting a mani-pedi. Those things are great. I would class those things more as self-care though. Self-love for me is really about stepping into the highest possible version of you and creating the life that you are meant to live. Okay, walking your authentic path, really stepping into your power so that you can manifest everything that you've ever desired in life. That for me is what self-love is really all about. And while self-care definitely comes into this, it's so much more than just, taking a bubble bath or going and getting a mani-pedi. And so things like taking a freezing cold shower for a couple of minutes first thing in the morning. You might be thinking, that sounds nothing like what I imagined self-love to look like. But I promise you, what you are doing by doing this, you are getting out of your comfort zone. You are taking that step each day to say, look, I am embracing something that is beyond my comfort zone and I am withstanding that. Okay, so I'm doing it. I'm taking that step to do something that doesn't necessarily feel comfortable to me, but I'm doing it anyway. And our ability to live beyond our comfort zone is like a muscle that we can strengthen. So if you're doing these little things each day, such as a cold shower, what you're doing is you're making a statement that says, I am willing to put myself out there. I am willing to go beyond what is safe, what is comfortable. And the more you do it, the more you build up that resilience to live outside of your comfort zone. And why is this important? Well, the things that are going to allow you to step into your greatness are often going to be the things that require you to be outside of your comfort zone. So take, for example, let's say, for example, you're not living your purpose right now and you know that you are meant for something more, but that something more feels unknown. It feels a little bit scary. Maybe it's starting a new business. Maybe it's quitting your job to go traveling. Maybe it's some other sort of pursuit that you're really passionate about. Okay? If we are getting out of our comfort zone daily and that becomes our new normal, just think about how we're then able to deal with other things that require us to get out of our comfort zone as well. Okay, so let's say, for example, I mentioned that this is something that is featured in our free course. The reason why the cold shower thing is featured in our free course, and we encourage people to do that as part of the free course, is because I know that that is the first step for many people of really getting out of their comfort zone and making it a daily practice. So that when they step into their business, when they start their new path as a coach, they're already getting out of their comfort zone every day, and it's not such a big deal. And as I said, it's those things outside of your comfort zone, that is where the magic is going to happen. And that for me is what self-love is really all about, making magic happen for yourself and for your life. Okay, so let's move on then. What is the next practice that I love that helps me cultivate self-love? Embracing who I am authentically and unapologetically. Okay, self-love, a big part of that for me is really accepting who you are, letting go of the idea of who you felt you should be, and really stepping into the person that you are meant to be. And again, this is where if you're getting out of your comfort zone, this is going to come far easier to you, because often stepping into the person that you are meant to be is going to feel uncomfortable to begin with. Why? Because you're not used to being that person. Okay, so if you know deep down that you're meant to be this successful, abundant, let's say entrepreneur, yet right now you are introverted, you're lacking confidence in yourself, you're lacking self-belief, you're struggling to really, claim your worth. When you start stepping into that new identity to begin with, it will feel uncomfortable because what is unknown is often very uncomfortable. Okay, so embracing who you are, first of all, it starts with actually figuring out who that person is. Who is that person that you were meant to be before society told you who you should be? And this is often quite a tricky task because we're so conditioned by society and by, what our family have told us and what, we've experienced in our life. We have been taught to basically wear a mask throughout most of our entire life, and sometimes we've been wearing that mask for so long, it actually feels like this is our identity. But then when we're very honest with ourselves and we ask ourselves, is this really who I am and what I want and what I enjoy? And is this who I was really meant to be? If we really dig deep and we find the answer is no, it's the next step is then thinking, well, how do I then start to peel back those layers and start to reveal who I am, if I was to be completely myself? And this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. Right? You don't just step into that new identity overnight. It is a process and you have to be gentle with yourself on that process. Okay, but a good place to start is thinking about where are you experiencing shoulds, too many shoulds. Okay, so what I mean by this, how many times do you make decisions based upon duty versus desire? Oh, I should do that because, this is what my parents would want for me, or I should do this because it seems like that's what everyone else is doing. Okay, so for me, a really good example of this was deciding to buy a house. I took a hell of a lot longer than anybody I knew to get onto the property ladder. And to begin with, it was largely financial because I didn't have the money. And when I was kind of getting towards sort of the later end of my 20s and lots of my friends from school and from uni had got onto the property ladder, I was financially in a bit of a mess and I was nowhere near in a place to be able to afford my own home. Okay, so it was partly financial, but then it got to a point where my finances changed. And what was really interesting was that I didn't straight away go and save up all my money to buy a house. I instead decided to go traveling. I decided to spend all of my money on going traveling. I did an amazing ski season. Me and my partner and I, we rented a chalet out in Verbier in Switzerland. We went to Bali, we went to California. That's what our money went on. And if I'd have been listening to, what I should do, and in fact, at the time, a lot of people were saying to me, you should really think about getting on the property ladder. But I knew, because I'd started to do the work around this, I knew that would, for me, be acting from a place of duty rather than desire. If I was true to my heart at that time, I didn't want a house. I didn't want to be tied down with a mortgage. I didn't want to be in one place. I wanted to travel. So I was allowing myself to act out of desire rather than duty. And in doing so, I was being true to my authentic self. And for me, this is a big, big way to practice self-love. And what was really interesting actually was that time that I spent, and I think this was my first big step into acting for myself, acting in my best interest rather than going along with what I felt like I should be doing. This big statement of, okay, rather than settling down and getting a mortgage like everybody else was telling me I should, I completely went against the grain and, spent all of my money on travel. And what was really interesting was this was when I started to witness huge, huge shifts in terms of my manifestations. Financially, this was when my business really, really started to take off. It was the point at which my partner was able to quit his job because the business was supporting us both financially. And it makes complete sense that this would tie in, this kind of financial upturn in my business would tie in with the time when I started to really embrace who I was and what I really wanted. Because there is a direct link between how you love yourself and what you are able to see in terms of your manifestations. You manifest based upon how you feel about yourself. Okay, your beliefs about yourself are shaping what you experience. Okay, and so for me, practicing self-love, if you want to manifest more than you could have ever imagined possible, self-love has to become a non-negotiable. And embracing what you really want is obviously a big part of that. Okay. And, if we think about it, if we want to manifest the things that we actually want, we need to start accepting what those things actually are rather than trying to convince ourselves we want something different. Okay. Or going along again with what we should want. Now, another important point when it comes to self-love is the boundaries that you're putting into your life. How good are you at setting boundaries for yourself, for your time, for your energy? One of the biggest acts of self-love you can do for yourself is to say no. Say no to the people, the things, the experiences that do not serve you. Because if you say yes to something that isn't in alignment with who you are, or drains your energy, or makes you feel negative, you are taking yourself away from the life that you are meant to live. Okay? Because ultimately, there's got to be a balance of something. You can't just say yes to everything. So if you're saying yes to something that doesn't serve you, it could ultimately mean you're saying no to something that does serve you much better. Okay. And so boundaries, it's not about being rude, because sometimes people think, oh, well, I worry about saying no to somebody because I don't want to offend them, or I don't want to upset them, or, again, it's acting from that place of duty. Oh, I feel like I should say yes to that person. Maybe it's a friend who asks you to do something and you feel, obliged to say yes, even though you know that there's other things at the moment that you would much prefer to give your time and energy to. Self-love is having the courage to say no. Okay? And what's really interesting is that your energy is going to be reflected back to you in the people that you meet. So once you start having those boundaries in place and start being firm with them, you will find that people naturally start to respect those boundaries as well. You start to find that you're not going to get taken advantage of as often, or, people will respect your time. But if you are a bit ambiguous with your own boundaries, or a bit sort of, you don't really have strong boundaries in place. So let's say, for example, you say yes to people when actually you really mean no. Or maybe, let's say, for example, you're a coach and you're doing a client session, and you know that this session should only last an hour, but you end up going on for an hour and a half, and you're thinking to yourself, I've got other things that I need to be doing. If you don't have those strong boundaries in place, that energy that you're putting out there, you will find that that energy starts to attract the kinds of people who don't respect your boundaries either, because you don't have respect for your own boundaries. Okay, so putting some boundaries in place. And again, this is another act of getting uncomfortable, because if you're not used to doing this, the first time that you start doing it, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's perhaps going to feel a little bit scary to say no to somebody, or, to be firm about what you want, or to stand up for yourself if you feel that, somebody's overstepped your boundaries. These things are all going to feel uncomfortable. So going back to my first point, practicing getting out of your comfort zone regularly, things like putting proper boundaries in place, that itself is going to come a lot easier. Now, I spoke at the beginning of this episode about, daily rituals, things that you can put into place. And obviously that is a big part of self-love, creating that time for yourself to do the things that make you feel good. But this whole idea of doing things that make you feel good, just on a simpler level, it's really about being intentional about whether or not something does or does not make you feel good. And just being mindful about what you are giving your energy to. Because so often we slip into doing things, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of boredom, that we think, oh, okay, well, this is just a way for me to relax and to feel good. But yet, if we really tune in to what we are doing, it's not necessarily making us feel incredibly high vibe. So what I mean by this, a really good example is, let's say, for example, you decide to zone out to Netflix. You decide to binge watch a show on Netflix. And you think, what, for me, it's an act of self-love because I'm relaxing. It makes me feel good. Does that actually make you feel good? Or have you got confused with the idea that this perhaps makes you feel good? But when you ask yourself honestly and check in with yourself, let's say you have been watching Netflix for 3 hours. How much better do you actually feel for it? Has it actually made you feel better? Or have you zoned out as a way to avoid tuning in, okay? Because it's one thing to feel good, but it's quite another thing to just avoid feeling bad, okay? They're two very different things. Feeling good is not the same as avoiding feeling bad. And often we do things such as binge watching Netflix, drinking, maybe it's online shopping, convincing ourselves that these things make us feel good. But for how long do these things actually make you feel good? Because often we think they're making us feel good because they're just distracting us from something else that we perhaps need to deal with, okay? So we're tuning out rather than actually tuning in. And feeling good for me means being fully present in the moment, okay? And really feeling into whatever it is that you're doing and actually feeling that shift in your vibration. And that to be something that has a ripple effect afterwards. You're still feeling the effect of that activity afterwards. So let's say, for example, it's a yoga class or meditation or a walk in nature. You feel good in the moment, and yet afterwards, it's almost like that ripple effect. You continue to feel better and better and better. Yet take something like online shopping. You get a hit of dopamine in that moment and it feels good for a short time. Yet afterwards, we can sometimes feel quite remorseful for what we've done. We can feel quite sluggish if we've been online for ages. Let's say we've been watching a Netflix series. Afterwards, we can feel quite tired. So it's not to say exclusively that these things, aren't necessarily high vibe activities. For you, they may be, but you need to be intentional about them. You need to be mindful about exactly how are these things making you feel. Is it a false, quick hit of, a pretend high vibe, or is it an actual high vibe? Okay, because I know for me, the things that really, really make me feel good and really I know are altering my vibration and it's a true transition in my frequency, I know that is the case because I feel it way after I've even done that thing. So let's say, for example, I meditate in the morning. It will feel good in that moment, but I know I'll get to the end of the day and I will still be feeling the effects of that, okay? So these are not typically the things that I've spoken about in this episode today are perhaps not typically the things that many people would associate with self-love. And it's why I wanted to talk about them, because they're perhaps things that don't often get discussed enough when it comes to self-love. Again, people often confuse self-love with self-care. And yes, taking a bubble bath, getting a mani-pedi, going and getting a massage. Don't get me wrong, I love doing all of those things, but that is not the be-all and end-all when it comes to self-love. Okay, so hopefully this has given you some other ideas of what it really requires to love yourself unconditionally so that you can manifest more of the good stuff in your life. And if you loved this episode, I would absolutely love it if you gave me a review on iTunes. It's really easy to do. Just in the app on your phone, you can go in, leave a review, and tell me what you think. And if you do have any suggestions of topics you would like to see covered, please feel free to drop into my DMs on Instagram. It's Dani_Watson_coaching. Come and say hello. I love connecting with people over on the gram. Thank you very much for tuning in today. If you are in the UK listening to this, enjoy what is a beautifully sunny day, and I will catch up with you all again soon. Lots of love, ladies. If you are wanting to build your own successful online coaching business, make sure to check out Freedom, Abundance and Impact, our free 10-day business and mindset course for coaches and aspiring coaches. To access, simply head to wearetheclique.com and click free course in the menu.